Well, the figures are stark, and it's nowhere near good enough, and there's a huge amount of work that needs to be done. What I'm absolutely very determined to do is make sure that housing is treated as an emergency, and not just by government parties. Housing can't just be an emergency for those who need a house, for their parents and government parties. Housing needs to be an emergency for every aspect of the state. It needs to be an emergency for Uisce Éireann, it needs to be an emergency for the ESB, it needs to be an emergency for local authorities. And what I've made very clear as leader of Fine Gael is we won't be in a position to agree to allocate any additional capital funding from the Apple money, for example, to Uisce Éireann until we know that in return for investing more in water, which we want to do, there's going to be a knock-on effect in terms of more homes being able to be built in terms of service land. I think similarly we need to have that conversation in terms of energy. We have passed landmark legislation in terms of planning. It now needs to be enacted. So I'm very clear that housing is an emergency. It absolutely is. But I'm also very clear that it needs to be an emergency for every part of the state. And at the moment, I'm not sure that it is. There are more agencies that could do more. And we need to pull together. If you look at how we've responded to other emergencies in this country, where all parts of the state have put their shoulder to the wheel, I think that needs to happen. And we have a Cabinet Committee on housing on Monday, where I look forward to being able to discuss this in more detail.
Sorry, on that, you mentioned it's an emergency. Surely that would allow for big, severe emergency measures to be brought in rather than, as you said, they're waiting for legislation to pass and go through.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I mean, I suppose I just say back, I mean, we have, for example, passed the Planning Act, the Planning Reform Act, and it's the second largest piece of legislation ever passed in the history of Ireland. The most important thing now is that it's implemented and implemented quickly. So, I live in a county of Wicklow where we need to build more homes, and yet in parts of Wicklow we're being told we can't currently build more homes because of population figures and planning restrictions. We need to move beyond that. So, I mean, the message from government is very clear. Please get on with it. Every part of bureaucracy in Ireland needs to now get on with delivering, because for people living in the box room of their parents' house, they need to see hope, they need to see progress. I'll give you one practical example of what we've said in recent weeks around the planning exemption for developments in people's gardens. It's not being presented as a solution to the housing crisis, but it's something practical that can be done in the here and now to get the planner out of your back garden if you're trying to take proactive measures to assist your own family. And I'm very determined from a Fine Gael perspective in government that every single day, every single week, we keep on coming up with more practical measures that can be taken to help people. I'm disappointed in where we are with water. I'm very disappointed in relation to the fact that we have so many parts of this country where it's taking too long to deliver wastewater treatment plants, water connections. We're investing lots more in water. Water quality matters, absolutely matters, but I also want to see more measures taken by Uisce Éireann in relation to housing supply, and we intend to provide more money for them through the Apple funding, but in return we want to have an assurance of what that'll do in housing supply.